Jane Elliot was a primary school teacher, a third grade teacher back in the 1960s. And she was really profoundly affected by the civil rights movement at the time and had been talking to her class about some of the things that were going on.
This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is?
National Brotherhood.
National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood? Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians.
Absolutely, the Indians. Many places in the United States. How are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different color.
You think you know how that would feel to be judged by the color of your skin? I don't. Do you think you do? No, I don't think you would know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you?
And then the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. happened, and she felt so convicted that something needed to be done in order to give the children an in vivo experience of what it's like to be discriminated against, that talking was not enough, that there needed to be an experience of it that would be formative and educational for them. And so she constructed an experiment, and she took the children and told the class that that day they were going to participate in an experiment, and she divided them into these two groups.
It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah!
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day. I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. This is a fact. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground.
On that first day, she told the blue-eyed children that they were in the minority, that they were not as smart, that they were not as clean, and that they were really to be avoided. And the brown-eyed children, on the other hand, were more gifted, and that they would tend to do better at things, and they were superior. And so what then ensued was the children falling into the, looking at each other in different ways. She also did an additional thing, which is kind of important to mention, and that is that she got the brown-eyed children, so the majority group, to put armbands on the blue-eyed children to distinguish them so that they could be seen from a distance, and, that would help them to know that this is someone to avoid.
The brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are.
So she essentially artificially created these groups based on an arbitrary characteristic about that person. And what then happened was the children started to treat each other in those ways. So the brown-eyed children started using blue eyes as an insult towards the other children. They started to not play with them on the playground. And it actually culminated in physical violence between the children, even just in the one day that they were engaged in that experiment.
Ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's coming over there. Hey, Miss Lake, you better keep that on your desk. Look, the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliot was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes. They always call us that.
They keep calling us brown eyes.
What's wrong with being called brown-eyed?
It means that we're stupider.
I watched what had been marvelous cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes.
It's worth mentioning she flipped it the next day and reversed the experiment. And so they both sides got to experience what it was like to be in the minority. And then she debriefed it with them and so on. And she repeated that same experiment a number of times, including for a documentary. But what was really telling about that whole thing was that even though the children knew that these things weren't really true, they quite quickly fell into it. And there were actually things that Jane Elliot noticed in terms of the children's academic performance as well, that they fell into line with what they had been told was true about them. So the brown-eyed children actually did better on tasks that were presented to them that day, having been told that they were more gifted, more intelligent, and the blue-eyed children did much worse and tended to give up more quickly and those sorts of things. So it was a powerful example of what happens when you put people into groups, you label them, you other them by doing things like putting armbands on them, and then the way that people will then act in accordance with what they've been told they should do.
Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses?
I forgot them.
You forgot them. And what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses?
He forgot them.
He forgot them. Yesterday we were visiting, and Greg said, "Boy, I like to hit my little sister as hard as I can. That's fun." What does that tell you about blue-eyed people?
They're naughty.
The brown-eyed people may take off their collars, and each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They're smarter than blue-eyed people. And if you don't believe it, look at Brian. I use Orton Gillingham Phonics. We use the card pack. The brown-eyed children were in the low class the first day, and it took them 5.5 minutes to get through the card pack. The second day, it took them 2.5 minutes. The only thing that had changed was the fact that now they were superior people. You went faster than I've ever had anyone go through the card pack. Why couldn't you get them yesterday?
We had those collars on.
You think the collars kept you?
You just keep thinking about those collars.
Oh, and you couldn't think as well with the collars on.
Well,
4 minutes and 18 seconds. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. How long did it take you today?
4 minutes and 18 seconds.
What happened?
One down.
What were you thinking of?
This.
I hate today.
How do you do? I hate too.
Because I'm blue-eyed.
See, I am too.
There's nothing, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's not pleasant. This is a filthy, nasty word called discrimination. We're treating people a certain way because they are different from the rest of us. Is that fair?
No.
Nothing fair about it. We didn't say this was going to be a fair day, did we?
No.
And it isn't. It's a horrid day.
It's quite disturbing.
Where does your mind immediately transfer when you consider Jane Elliott's experiment with what you see here today?
Look, I think the context in which I posted that at the time was what I had noticed occurring with the labels of vaccinated and unvaccinated, or anti-vaxxer, and the way that these groups were being created and people treated differently, or perhaps even being encouraged to treat a particular group of people differently, or even in a nasty or ostracizing sort of way. And I saw really strong parallels with that. And for me, the main point there is that I believe that it's an arbitrary distinction to make, because if we're concerned about people becoming ill with a disease, then it is people who are infected with it that we should be concerned about, and that we should, do our best to make sure that people who are actually ill are getting the treatment that they need, and they're not mixing with people who are vulnerable at that time. But to put together the categories of someone who has not been vaccinated and treat them as though they are ill or as though they are a danger to others is a really unhelpful thing to do. It's similar to putting the armband on a child and saying they're more dirty, they're not as intelligent, you should avoid them. And so that's where my mind goes about part of the applicability of that. And I think there's other sorts of labels and out groups that are being created as well, but that's probably the most salient one.